So I was going to talk about natural meditation, which is deceptively simple. It's not a technique. In a sense, you could say everything we do all day long is a sort of technique, or it has a purpose, or it has an agenda, a goal, a process. When we sit and engage natural meditation, none of those are true. There's no goal. There's no process. There's no agenda. And there's no technique. Now, for a certain kind of mind that's really off-putting, it just sounds like, it sort of just sounds meaningless, I think, to some people. And that's okay. It's not something you necessarily get immediately the first time you hear it. The reason you don't get it in that a person who has that response, the reason they don't get it is because they're receiving it with the habituated tendency they have to always do something with information. So take information and use it for some process, for some goal, to cause something to happen. And if they're really honest, it's usually obvious that they're trying to do something to benefit themselves, whether it's get into a more peaceful state, or learn how to do something, or to discover something, learn something, undo something, fix something. And all of those processes, of course, have their place. But we can get so much identity, we often do get so much identity tied up in those ways of being, those ways, really ways of thinking, but it feels like being. It feels like that's all there is that you could possibly be doing. When that identity construct receives the teaching of natural meditation in the way I described it, it just doesn't make any sense, right? It just sounds like a square circle or something. It's just nonsense. And for somebody who has that response to it, I would just suggest start with a technique. Start with any technique. Try a few and find one that works for you, whether it's breath counting, or a mantra, or labeling your experience. Sound, hearing, feeling, emotion, thinking, like labeling your experience. There are many approaches, but sometimes just giving that really solidified sense of a doer something to do while you're meditating, and no other goal, no other way to preoccupy the mind other than just that simple task. And then, if the meditation is taught right, sneak in some pointers like, don't push or pull on thoughts, don't push or pull on experience, don't judge experience, etc. Then you'll start to tune in to a sort of meditative experience. You might have profound experiences, you might have more of a subtle relaxation. But over time, you may come to a place where hearing it again suddenly makes a different kind of sense when someone describes natural meditation or shikantaza. Now, someone who maybe isn't that solidified in the sense of a doer, but still has some challenge with this type of meditation, would be somewhere kind of where I was when I first heard about it years ago, when I heard it as shikantaza. And even though I knew it was the technique of no technique, I heard it a bunch of times, I still thought it was a technique. I didn't know that. I didn't know that no technique simply and literally meant no technique. So strangely, I just always thought it was some sort of technique, something you could learn. And for me, it just one day clicked. I wasn't trying to do it. I wasn't trying to understand. I never even cared to understand it. I just thought it wasn't for me. But I was meditating after years of meditation, and all of a sudden the technique I was using, which was kind of like a mantra at that point, it just stopped. It just was obvious it didn't need to be there, and the meditation was still just going on. And then at the same time, it was obvious that the meditation that I'd always been trying to achieve or cultivate, or sometimes would recognize it was deeper and other times not as much, I realized it's going on all the time. So it's kind of at the same time I realized it wasn't a technique, I realized that this meditation is actually what is going on all the time. And the tasks we occupy our mind with are kind of extra stuff added on that just distract us from what's already happening. So natural meditation, in the way I talk about it, is actually just reclaiming what's already here. And it's just what's here, what's heard, what's felt, what's seen. Even a doubt. I think doubt is probably what pulls us from an immediate experience of natural meditation into thought often, because it's not hard to hear, it's not hard to feel, it's not hard to see. But then a thought will say something like, but this, I don't feel like I'm meditating, and then blah, 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 and maybe I'm not doing it right, and thought after thought after thought after thought. And then it's like thought storm. That's probably what pulls us out of it quite often. There's some sort of doubt, or, maybe I'm not doing it right, but if you're able to recognize that there's a sound and sensation and forms and shapes in front of the eyes, and then instead of being identified with that doubt, you just recognize, there's a thought, a doubt. You don't have to label it, but it can be recognized without labeling. It's just a movement of consciousness, a movement of mind. Some thinking is going on. And then attention, if we don't push or pull on our thought experience, then even thoughts are just fluctuations and movements in that space of thought, that conscious space. Not a space, but it feels like a space. Just movements. And then we realize, sometimes over time, and sometimes it just dawns on us, that the incessant thinking that seems to overtake us or preoccupy us a lot of the time isn't so automatic. It requires a little bit of effort on our part. It requires a little bit of pushing and pulling in that space. Like a little bit of aversion and desire, or grasping and avoiding, or whatever, however you want to say it or think about it. But that little bit of, almost as if there's a wave on each side, and then you're the one standing in the middle between the waves trying to push them apart or keep them together, as if you're the thinker. When you see the thinker clearly enough, you see there is no thinker, and that dissolves the thinker, and then the thought that was taking itself to be the thinker is just not there. So there's only thinking. And when there's only thinking and nothing pushing or pulling on it, and it's not about anyone or anything, and you're not engaged in anything, it's just a meditation, then it very quickly calms down. We polarize the thought space by believing in it. Believing those thoughts are real, thoughts about me outside of this moment. Like they're some kind of physical reality that we need to engage in the moment. And so we disengage because there's only this moment. When there's only the movement of consciousness or the stillness of consciousness. And our attention may stay there for a bit, but we're not controlling our attention. It can move wherever it naturally moves. It may stay there for a bit in that relaxed, conscious space. Whether thoughts are here or not doesn't actually matter. And it may find itself in the sound. May find itself in a sound in the room or the whole soundscape of the environment. It may find itself in a part of the body, a sensation or a tightness or a contact point. But there's no need to move it away from that. There's no need to label that. There's no need to picture that. If a picture of it appears in the mind, that's fine. And that's a thought. And that's a visual image made out of thought stuff. So now attention's in thought, which is perfectly okay. So there's no goal as to where our attention moves. It's free to move wherever it wants to move, or however it naturally moves. So natural meditation is as simple as choosing to sit, or maybe lay, but to take up a meditative posture, whatever that is for you, and then do nothing specific. Don't add to your experience. Don't subtract from your experience. Don't judge your experience. Don't compare experience to a previous experience of perhaps natural meditation. We're not rating this. We're not giving it a grade. And yet if a thought of grading happens, it happens. It's fine. We're not directing our attention a certain way. We're not purposely modulating our attention. The noticing is the attention. And the noticing finds itself in the experience immediately, every time. So it can't be wrong. The beauty of natural meditation is there's no wrong way to meditate. Unless, I guess, you purposely and stubbornly apply a technique. But there's no need to do that. It can be coarse experience, it can be subtle experience. It can be paradoxical experience, two experiences at once. It can be a doubt thought. It can be an evaluation thought. It can be a random, unrelated thought. It can be a barely formed thought. It can be a thought dissolving back into whatever it arose from. So we don't prefer attention to be in thought or consciousness or sound or sensation when we're engaging natural meditation. That's the key. There is just no preference. Or to see that a preference is only one thought. So we're not trying to achieve a deep state of relaxation. If relaxation comes, it comes. If headiness comes, it comes. If our experience changes and shifts rapidly, that's what happens. It's fine. If it just calms way down and gets very quiet, that's fine. There really is no goal. Truly. We're really just practicing whether it's possible to exist for this time without applying will, effort, control. It might feel awkward at first, or restless, or just strange, and that's perfectly fine. That's just the experience. One time that you meditate with natural meditation, it might be attention in the thoughts stream most of the time. Don't add to it, don't push and pull on the thoughts, but that may just be where your attention finds itself. The next time you might find it more in the body, in the sensations. Or you may not even know where it is. It's in some subtle place. A place that doesn't have a name or a specific location. That's perfectly fine too. We don't have to keep close track of what's happening. Just some alertness. So you may or may not use this natural meditation or engage it, and it's fine. There's nothing magical about it really, although for me it just became the baseline experience. When I'd sit and close my eyes, it's just there. But if you do engage it, if it's part of your practice or regimen or whatever, yeah, I would recommend doing it once a day as the first round of sitting, or a small portion of your sitting. Because really what we're doing is practicing, I think you're practicing in a sense, one way of saying this, or you're being practiced for some of the deeper, more subtle shifts that occur in realization, like non-dual. Experience of non-dual is just an expression of impossibly close and intimate sense phenomenon, but they're not anywhere specific. They're kind of everywhere and kind of here at the same time. But it's a very different way of experiencing senses. It's obviously different, and it's obviously more fundamentally accurate or real. But in that, we start to see how the illusion of will, or the illusion of separate self, operates, and it's just a thought that says, I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that, now I'm going to do this. Instead, the experience is much more like things are just coming forward as this, or I know about things, reality is coming forward as this, very obviously. Out of nothingness into this, into thisness, into sound, vividly alive, non-dualistic, clear, pristine sound, sensation, forms and color and movement. So in my estimation or my experience, when you practice natural meditation, even early on, even if it feels somewhat awkward or a little bit evasive or just really, really subtle, what you're actually coming in contact with is that non-dual truth that's underlying all of the overlays, all of the constructs, all of the labels that our minds pretty automatically or almost automatically put over our experience moment to moment. What looks like, when you look out into the world, what looks like a room and a spacious area and other objects, it's fine. It's the way the mind is putting it together so that we can function practically in the world. But with non-dual realization, you see that's actually an overlay. That what's, for lack of a better way of saying it, what's underneath that does not look like that. It doesn't have separation. There's no boundaries. That's the key insight. It truly is boundless. So I know that can happen suddenly for people, and it can also happen slowly over time. So to me, the engagement in natural meditation, again, even if these are very subtle experiences and you're not experiencing it as boundless clarity, I think that is what you're engaging. You're engaging it in a subtle way, even though the mind is still making a lot of noise. It's still seeming to form a lot of constructs and boundaries, look like a three-dimensional world. You're actually engaging the more primary truth, the more primary fundamental experiential truth of this exact moment, this exact experience right now. And that is boundless, without division, not bound by the mental construct that we call space, like self and other, subject and object, here and there. So it's always there. It's always the case. And then the mind will put together a spatial visual experience that helps us navigate it, I suppose. You can navigate without it, actually, but helps us navigate the three-dimensional world and communicate things and so forth. But the underlying truth is there. And so that's why I say you can't really miss it. With natural meditation, you can't really do it wrong. Even if the mind's making 1,000 doubts about it, you're still engaging it. It's still there. Non-dual is still there. So it's valuable. But again, if it's just too frustrating or it doesn't make any sense at all, or you just never gotten it, that's okay. Just there's plenty of ways to meditate, and you can return to it when it feels relevant later on.